Good morning. We began the Maamar yesterday, and it's really a fascinating point that we made at the very onset of the Maamar. The point is, Ki Seitzei that whenever a Jew has a challenge, and whatever it may be, the approach has to be that you are way beyond your enemies. God's going with you in every situation, every time, every place. The Torah is telling every single one of us that when you that your approach to your challenges is very significant. Your success is predicated on your approach to your challenges. So that when a Jew approaches his challenges with this mindset that he's Ali Becha, he's beyond all of the enemies, beyond all of the various challenges that he may have. So the Torah says, then God will give you your enemy into your hand. Because you're approaching your challenges with this kind of mindset, so that sort of guarantees Hashem to respond to you and to give you your enemies. Now, we started to discuss the spiritual significance of the particular kind of challenge that this pasuk is expressing. Shalom Aleichem. Rashi says in the beginning of this historic portion that the Torah is talking about a mechamas reshus. Mechamas reshus means an optional war, not a war you have to fight, but a war that you could fight if you wanted. So the Hebrew word reshus is also a reference, a war that you fight because you decide to fight it, as opposed to the wars that Yeshua fought to conquer the land of Israel, which are called Mechamas Mitzvah, a war that you're mandated to fight. So in our lives, Mechamas Reshus means that you're dealing with items in your life that Hashem doesn't command you explicitly what you need to do. It's a gray area. It's something that the Torah says you have permission to do. You have permission to eat, permission to sleep, permission to enjoy. There's no mitzvah specifically to partake in whatever it may be. But the Torah says that that even though we're talking about mundane things, therefore you think, okay, the Torah doesn't talk about these things. This is just my own arena, it's my own things. So Rashi's words, allude to how the Torah also talks about the mundane. Torah does have something to say about the mundane. As the Ramban Nachmanides says, that there's one mitzvah that separates all of Torah and puts Torah into it and changes the conversation of Torah to a new standard. The mitzvah is Kedoshim, the mitzvah is to be holy. Without the mitzvah being holy, so then you could interpret the Torah in the following way. You could say Hashem has a list of yeses and nos, of do's and don'ts. And if you keep all these things, then he won't zap you. And now you're left to enjoy the world as much as you can, as long as you don't break the rules. That's how you could interpret Torah. The language of Nachmanides could become novel b'shus Torah. The Torah, without this one mitzvah, which changes the conversation, you could become an abomination. You could become a really vile individual with granted permission by Torah. But the one mitzvah that changes the whole conversation is a mitzvah Kedoshim to you. Mitzvah Kedoshim to you means you have to be holy. Mitzvah being holy means that everything a Jew does has that purpose. That's what Torah means when it says, "B'chol derchecha da'ei," in all your ways you should know Hashem, or as the Talmud phrases, "Kol ma'asecha l'shem shemayim," all your actions should be for the sake of Hashem. That's what this pasuk is referring to. Mechamas reshus. Torah is saying that when you're involved in the mundane things, hakos medaber. Torah talks about it. You're not like left to your own devices to figure it out. The Eibishter has an instruction for you. There's something unique, though, about the mitzvah Kedoshim to you that separates it from all the mitzvahs. Every other mitzvah has a clear definition of what it is. A tefillin has a size, a sukkah has a size, a lumen esrog has a size, and a way it's performed. Mitzvah Kedoshim to you has a lot to do with you. There was a time when you could survive without an air conditioner, and and there, unfortunately, when there's a blackout, we find people chas v'shalom dying without air conditioning. People got used to air conditioning, that is. And so when the Torah says to be holy, it means to everything you do has that purpose, but the Torah leaves that to you to define what that means in your life, and therefore you have to be very real to give the right definition of what the Torah means. But that war, that effort, is not something you have to go into by yourself. Hakosim Adaber, Hashem talks about that. Hashem instructs you, although you have to figure out what Hashem wants you to do. But Hashem instructs you in that challenge. And the Torah continues and says, "B'shavisa shivya," you will take captive the captives. We asked yesterday, what's the emphasis of taking captive the captives? Is double expression. Ordinarily, when there's a war, so you fight the war, and then you're able to take captives. It sounds like from the Torah's expression that whoever you're capturing has already been captured before, that you're recapturing something that has been captured before. And that's basically where we got up to. Let's continue now inside. The Torah is precise, and it says, you will capture the captives. What is the Torah emphasizing? In this battle of conquering things in this world and to make items in this world become vessels for godliness, vessels for holiness, there are two ways to explain this effort. Aleph, one way of explaining this is as follows. You could say like this: the natural place of all physical things in this world is in this world. That, in other words, they're meant to be, so to speak, here. And I, with my efforts, is machter. Good morning. No problem. I, with my efforts, am able to take the physical items in this world and elevate them and pull them away from their natural space. One way of explaining our engagement in the physical world is when we use something for holiness is we're tearing it away from its natural habitat. This, you could say that the physical items, so to speak, you might say they're born to be wild. They're born to be physical and mundane and whatever, and not refined. And I am taming them, and I am channeling them, and I am using my neshama to take them away from their natural habitat. It's kind of like taking an animal and putting it into a zoo. That's when I take something physical, and a physical item which my animal soul is naturally attracted to, and for the sake of enjoying it, and I only able to see the periphery of the physical thing, that the opaque physical veneer of something. That's all I could see, and that's all that talks to me. And I ignore that, and I use it for the sake of Hashem. And I have not just I say a bracha, but my intent of why I'm engaging the physical is for the sake of Hashem. Therefore, I only use items which are actually beneficial for the service of Hashem. And my intent while I'm engaging with them is for the sake of Hashem. So what I'm doing is I'm taking them away from their natural habitat. That's something which is I pull them away from something. That means they have their space. And I'm elevating them to a higher space. I'm changing them. This is a wild thing. It's Hashem created to be wild. Hashem created to be something which is unholy. And I have now done something which is unnatural, and I've changed it. That's one way of explaining our engagement in the physical world. Then there's another way. Another way is if I look at the source, the divine root, ha'amiti, the real root, what's the real place of all physical things? What's the real root of all physical things? It's the spiritual. But these physical things have been captured from the side of holiness, and they've descended into this world. And so when I elevate them from the physical to the spiritual, I'm not tearing them away from their natural habitat. I'm bringing them back home. So those are the two ways we can look at our engagement in the physical. This is no ordinarily, this is a hamburger. Hamburgers are meant to enjoy. Hamburgers are meant as a type. Hamburgers are meant as something which brings you down. And I am tearing it away from its natural habitat. That's one way of looking at it. Another way of looking at it is Hameitzi Lecha Na'aretz, Shakil Nev Devari. Shakil Nev Devari means everything's created by God's words. That means what is the hamburger? The Rebbe Rashab said famously, he said, he's pointing to a table, he says, this isn't a piece of wood. This is the word of Hashem which says, be a piece of wood. Or as the Alter Rebbe said before his passing, that he doesn't see the rafters, he sees the word of Hashem which says, this should be a rafter. He's able to see the divine energy in the physical. Whereas Adam Rishon, when Hashem told the Malachim asked Hashem, what's so special about Adam Rishon? So Hashem brought the Malachim into this world, and he asked Adam Rishon to show his stuff. So Adam Rishon walks over to a cow and says, this is a para. And all the angels are astounded. Wow, it's a para. What's the big deal? It's a para. The big deal is it is able to see the letters of Hashem in the physical creature. You could see the divine energy which is in it. So these are the two ways of approaching our engagement in the physical. Am I bringing it back home, or am I capturing it? Am I freeing it, or am I taking it away? Even if I were to take the approach that physical reality is a reality, and this is their space, physical things belong here, and I elevate it nonetheless, and I tear it away from where it is and bring it up to its divine source, that's also great. That's also a lofty way of serving Hashem, because I'm elevating the physical. However, the second approach, that when I bring back that what I'm really doing is I'm bringing back the physical entities, physical objects, to their real place, to their true place, to their first place, where this gives you a different kind of energy. It's got a different kind of power. Why does it give you a different kind of energy? Because it gives you the sense that you're redeeming captives. I don't know if this will help or hurt the understanding of this concept, but for me, this sounds similar to people who work in saving animals. You know, they take the animals and they bring them into a zoo, or not a zoo. They bring them into a place they kill, a shelter, and a lot of them speak about how it was hard to pull the animal. They're very sensitive. People who work in this are obviously very sensitive to animals, etc. And they spend their whole day and night with these animals. So, and they have a real affinity and a real love for these animals. So a lot of them talk about the ability to bring them back out to the wild. Can bring it back out to its real space. They have such a love for these animals, and they feel the animals belong out there. That's their natural habitat. So in a similar way, when you feel that you're tearing things away from their space, okay, so you feel you're conquering it. So that has validity, and that's true from one perspective. But the real reality is that there's a godly spark which is in the physical things. And when you're using it for the sake of Hashem, you're causing a spark of Hashem to return home. You're freeing it, bringing it back home. That gives you a different kind of energy. You have the similar, if you care about the Eibishter, and you care about the godly sparks that Hashem put in this world, so then you have a whole different kind of alacrity and enthusiasm you're more stride in your step, and you're trying to elevate the physical to the spiritual. You feel like I'm doing something which is it's not just so noble, so gratifying to Hashem. I'm bringing back this godly spark which has become distant, and I bring it back home. I'm redeeming a captive. Just like the Torah says that it's a huge mitzvah when a Jew is in prison, to free that person from prison. So in a similar way, you are freeing from prison these godly sparks. What about Tanya? As the author explains in Tanya, author is talking about in chapter 31, one of the ways to animate our service of Hashem with joy. And the author says that we have to, in order to animate our service of Hashem with joy, we have to pay attention to the language of the Gemara, Shuva Ma'asim Tov. The Gemara says the soul comes to this world to do tshuva and good deeds. And the obvious question is the order. The Gemara places tshuva before good deeds. The natural order will be do good deeds. If you mess up, then do tshuva. The Gemara says you came to this world to do tshuva. The Gemara says tshuva first, then good deeds. And Alter says that an neshama is in a body, and because we're in this place of distance from our home, so every time you do a mitzvah, you have to have the following analogy in your mind. Imagine a king who has a son, who the son is far, far away from his father, and he's working in a prison. And then he gets a chance to come home. Can you imagine the simcha the father has when his son finally comes home? That takes the feeling you do a mitzvah. What's happening to a mitzvah is the Eibush is having his child come home. This is relevant thinking about this today because my kids come home from camp today. it's the longest amount of time I'm going to be away until Chassan and Shlichus, but big simcha. Capture them. Says there's no greater simcha than when someone leaves captivity and exile. For example, a prince who was in captivity and he's working in the mill in the prison. He's working a very difficult job. And he's now free and able to go home to his father, the king. There's no greater simcha than that. That's how to feel whenever you do a mitzvah. Your neshama is coming home. And now we're adding to that you're engaged in the physical world that has the same, it's really going on when we engage in the physical. And this explains the language of the Torah, and you'll capture that which has been captured already. What that means is, what you're doing is you're capturing something that was captured by the enemy. In other words, really, while these godly sparks were in the realm of the unholy, I don't know the words unholy, the words of the non-holy. While these godly sparks were not yet sanctified and brought to holiness, they were in prison. In order to add alacrity and enthusiasm and animation in our service of Hashem, the Torah specifically says, the Torah wants us to know that what we're really doing is we are freeing the godly sparks from captivity. We're bringing them back to their real place. We're freeing them. So that's one. To me, there's another angle to this. I was speaking about how much simcha Hashem has. But I think another place, so this is another point that Evan mentions, which is when you feel that the physical items you're dealing with in your life are meant to go to holiness, that's where they belong. So the challenge is different. It's kind of like how we explain the first part of the process. How do we explain the first part? Ki Seitzei. Why does the Torah say you go out to war above your enemies? Should have said against your enemies. Why did it say alivech? So he said that your approach to all challenges has to be that you're above, that you're beyond, that you're going to win this. And that's why the last letters of Ki Seitzei are the acronym of Elokecha, your God, because you have to realize that Eibush is going with you and you're going to win. So part of that paradigm for me is the physical items that I'm dealing with are meant to go to Kedusha. That's where they belong. Therefore, I'm going to win because that's what's supposed to happen. That's I know the script. So it's not just that the good cause for simcha to Hashem. It also gives me more alacrity and more enthusiasm, knowing that I'm going to win this because this is where these physical items really belong. Okay. So that's the explanation of the first pasuk. Now we have to explain the next part of the next few verses. The Torah says you see a woman in captivity, and the Torah says when you see a woman in captivity, the Torah permits. As Rashi says, the Torah speaks to the Yetzer Hara and allows the soldier in war to be with this woman one time, and then he brings the woman to her home, and he shaves her head and nails, and she cries for her father and mother for a month. What is this? What is spiritual counterpart? What is the Torah as a message for us at all times? What does this mean spiritually? Shaving her head, the nails, crying. What's going on? The Alter explains the spiritual meaning of these verses. The hair comes from the brain. The brain animates the hair. However, it's not the main component in the mind that animates the hair. Rather, it's what's called Moisrei Meichen. Moisrei Meichen means, I think the word is the sediment, the nethermost part of the mind, which is used to through the skull to animate the hair. So what that means on a spiritual level is the investment that we have to think about physical things. Our engagement with physical things is meant to be, as the Torah says, by the work of your hands you should bread. So Moisrei Meichen means when I'm excessively thinking about physical things and trying to earn a livelihood. It's Bernayim and Moisrei Midas. What are the nails? The nails represent the Moisrei Midas, the nethermost part of our emotions, meaning that I'm not using my emotions in the right way. I'm letting my emotions get carried away in the wrong direction. That's what is represented by the nails. That it originates from the feelings, the emotions of the godly soul. And now what I've done is I've been too obsessive, too into the physical, and I've Moisrei Midas. There's Midas, there's feelings, and that have gone in the wrong direction. So Rambam says in Meshach School, the person has to remove those excessive thoughts and feelings. That's the spiritual meaning of cutting the hair and cutting the nails. Cutting the hair means to direct your mind to what you need to think about. That's, by the way, one of the reasons we put on tefillin for these two things. It says in the Shulchan Aruch, when you put on tefillin, you have to think about how Hashem has commanded us to write these 4 sections of the Torah, to remember His miracles, so that we should subjugate our heart. And we actually put on tefillin next to our heart. We should subjugate our mind to Hashem, so that our mind is only used to serve Hashem, and our heart is only used for Hashem's sake, and to lessen our enjoyment in the world. That's the idea of cutting the nails and cutting the hair. So removing the moisres, removing the moisres means to redirect things and to not to be so excessive in my engagement with the physical world. It says that hair in general is an analogy for holiness. That's why it says that a Nazir is supposed to grow his hair long. On the other hand, we find the Torah says that a woman's supposed to cover her hair, and the Leviim, the Levites, in the time of the Beis Hamikdash, that to shave their hair in the time of the Mishkan. So the reason why we find this apparent contradiction about what hair is it a holy thing, is it not a holy thing? The reason where it all comes back to is that hair is a tiny bit of energy that trickles from the brain to the hair. So that tiny bit of energy could be considered positive or negative, depending on where it comes from. Meaning, if we're talking about the infinite light of Hashem, so having a contraction on the infinite light of Hashem is a positive thing. The world can't receive from this infinite light. So a contraction, which is represented by the hair, is considered a positive thing. That's why the Zohar says having a beard is something which brings Rachamim by Hashem. The beard, the Zohar compares to 13 midas of Rachamim, which shine in the month of Elul, that having a beard brings more Rachmanis of Hashem. Why is it more Rachmanis of Hashem? Because the beard is the it represents the divine flow that comes through the 13 midas of Rachel. On the other hand, by a woman, it's a sarbi she'erva, because since the soul of a woman, the soul of a Avim, they originated already from the place of Gevurah. Their souls come from the place of Gevurah, a place of contraction of godly energy. So having an additional contraction could actually cause there to be nourishment to Klippa. So it depends about where the divine source is for this for the hair. If it's coming from a super high source, then here's a positive thing. It's coming from a lower source, then here it means an additional contraction, which is negative. So so in our discussion, what we're discussing is similar to what the Gemara means when it says that an Am Haaretz is not allowed to eat meat. The Gemara says that someone who is ignorant in Torah can eat meat. What the Gemara means is that are you eating the meat or is the meat eating you? Are you using the meat for a holy purpose or is it bringing you down? If your engagement in the physical is something that brings you down, then you should abstain from it. However, if you're able to get control and use it for a holy purpose, then great. So are you using it or is it using you? So Moisre Midas means that you've gotten carried away. Your mind has gone too far, that's the hair. Your heart has gone too far, that's the nails. And so Torah says, and that happens, you need to cut your hair, cut your nails, and get things back in check. All right, any questions or comments? The musician Magnet puts it this way. The musician Magnet says in the Gemara, a person should never say, I hate pig. Rather, he should say, the Gemara says, I want to eat pig. Hashem told me I can't. Not because Hashem said so. The musician Magnet says it depends who is saying that. Someone who's never tasted pig can say that. Someone who's not a Baal Shuvah, but someone who has been into it before, he needs to use every means at his disposal to keep himself in check. In a similar way, if a person's already gone down the wrong path and his feelings have taken him away to the wrong place, the Torah says then you have to cut your nails or cut your hair. That means you have to distance yourself from those things that have brought you down. Okay, we'll stop here.
The beard represents the 13
attributes of mercy.
of mercy.